The Vienna Philharmonic, led by Georg Scholti, performing the opening movement to the Italian Symphony, the Symphony Number 4 in A, a little bit of music by Felix Mendelssohn. You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rusnak. This week, Winnipeggers have been encouraged to explore an alternative form of transport, swapping 4 wheels for 2 during Bike Week. A celebration of all things cycling. There have been group rides and workshops and events happening around town. And to chat a little bit more about his love of cycling and music, I'm joined by WSO Assistant Principal Bassist Daniel Perry. Morning, Daniel.
Good morning.
How's the ride in?
Oh, it was fantastic. Today was just exceptional weather, like low wind, which is, you know, that's a little bit different for Winnipeg, sunshine. And I even had a place to stop and refill my coffee on the way because some of the Bike Winnipeg people were in Bonnycastle Park doing coffee outside this morning.
I'm not going to say no to that. Sounds like a lovely, lovely morning indeed. So let me ask you this. Happy Bike Week. How have you been celebrating?
I like to say that Bike Week and Bike to Work Day are one of my favorite holidays of the year. So I've been involved with the board of Bike Week for 5 years now, I want to say. Kind of starting with COVID, so we started with Zoom calls, but we'd still get out and be able to see each other while riding. So that was,
Very, very special indeed. So one other question before we get to sort of this intersection of music and cycling. To you, what's the best thing about cycling in the city of Winnipeg?
Oh, if I had to pick one, I would say the sense of community. I mean, like something that's said time and time again in the cycling circles that I'm in is that in difference from a vehicle that's designed to dampen sounds and vibrations and everything, and puts up barriers around you as a sense of protection. When you're on a bicycle, you're open to all the elements. You can smell, you can hear, you can feel the breeze. But the big thing is that you can interact with other people. They can see you smile, you can smile back, you can yell and wave, and yeah. So I would say the sense of connection and the amount of community that's really been growing here.
I want to chat more about that, but before we do, again, want to thank you for swinging by the studio this morning. We are overdue in having you here because when I think cycling and classical music, you are the person who comes to mind. Can we chat off first a little bit more about you being here in Winnipeg? You arrived in 2014, right?
Yeah,
with the WSO?
So it's been about 10 years, yeah.
And you came up from Indianapolis.
That's correct.
That's originally your hometown? Yeah,
grew up in Indianapolis, went to Indiana University, and shortly moved up here.
So what came first, riding the bike or playing an instrument?
In my house, it's hard to say. So my dad's a trumpet player. My mom's a French horn player. So my dad was principal trumpet of Indianapolis for a long time. And my mother, while she never played professionally, one of her teachers in Oslo was Frøydisli Vekre, which is one of the first principal horn women in the world.
Wow.
So my family has pretty deep roots. But at the same time, I want to say I started cycling as soon as I had the legs to do it, maybe 3 or 4.
It sounds about right, eh? I'm curious, in terms of your instrument, you play the double bass. You come from a family of brass players. When did you start playing the double? Did you start with the double bass? I don't imagine it was that instrument first, right? Was it violin or perhaps a cello that you had in hand, or was it double bass from the get-go for you?
The very first thing I did actually was singing. So I was a wee little choir boy. Well, first solo. I remember singing solo in church. I was a soprano at the time.
Yeah. You and I both.
And joined up with children's choir, and then I started taking piano lessons. Double bass actually came along when I was 10 or 11, going into junior high. And what's really funny about it is at the time, I wanted to pick something that was big enough that I wouldn't be forced to take it on vacations to practice.
Good call.
Yeah.
So it was like that or tuba or timpani maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, timpani would have been a pretty good option too, hey?
Yeah, exactly that. And I guess all the while, I don't know if it was maybe a passion when you were 10 and 11, but all the while you're cultivating this musical passion, you're also cultivating this passion as a cyclist, just riding your bike. Have you always used cycling as your primary form of transportation?
I would say yes. For me, the bicycle has been kind of a multifaceted vessel. So yes, as transportation, especially growing up, I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, so a family of 7. And for me, a bicycle was also how I was able to gain a sense of freedom and independence, and also take some time away from a hectic household sometimes, and get to know my city really well.
I remember doing that exact same thing, you know, like being an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, jumping on the bike, riding to Sev, you know, meeting a friend there, getting a Slurpee, or just riding around town. It was just that sense of freedom, right? It's one of those things that you can feel very early on, and you can just jump on the bike, go for a ride, and meet some pals. It's just a great way to be.
Absolutely. And Slurpee runs, there's no age limit on those. I'm still doing them.
Yeah. I think I figured out what I'm doing this afternoon. But I want to fast forward a little bit here, because you've done more than ride recreationally. You've also participated in races, in cyclocross, and perhaps most famously have competed and completed a number of winter rides. Your fat bike during the coldest months of the year, most recently up in Alaska at the Iditarod Trail Invitational. A marathon ride, 350 miles, which is 563 kilometers. I got to ask, how was it?
Oh, it was awesome. I had a blast every second of it. Yes, it's hard in some ways, but a lot of things that are worthwhile doing are hard. And just to be one in Alaska for the first time, and to do it in winter when all the grizzly bears are asleep, actually. So it's maybe a little bit safer in that regard. It was just phenomenal. And now all I can think about is when am I going to go back?
Oh, no kidding. I can only imagine. I mean, I'm a fair weather cyclist myself. You know, it's one thing to ride during the summer months. It's another to ride in the dead of winter. What inspired you to really get out and explore through these winter months, and not only explore, but really kind of push the limits of riding?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, like, the first component here for me was, so my mother's from Norway, as I mentioned. She grew up in Oslo, and a lot of my family's there. I spent, before I came to Winnipeg, I spent half a season playing with the Trondheim Symphony over there as well. And growing up, as soon as we were able to, she threw us outside and put skis on our feet, because that's what you do as a Norwegian. And so our relationship with winter in my family has always been very encouraged as a positive one, getting outside and just thriving in the snow. And so it was something that I actually kind of looked forward to coming to Winnipeg. But a bigger thing for me too was when I moved to Winnipeg, I didn't have a bike. In school, both of my bikes were stolen, and I spent about 5 years without riding. And I got to Winnipeg, and it was, you know, I have my first full-time gig. I no longer am having to drive like several hours to go play in random pickup orchestra jobs. And all that time in the car doing all the gigging and the freelancing really got me down. I was noticing how much it was affecting my mental state and also my physical state. And coming to Winnipeg, the winters are so long here too. The first winter, I remember I spent a lot of time just in my apartment and in a lot of ways waiting it out. And I realized that that's not a sustainable way to do things. And I was like, well, I'm here. I'm in Manitoba. I'm in Winnipeg. I have to find a way to collaborate and like thrive in this place if I'm going to actually commit to this job. So I bought a solid bike off Kijiji one March, April, and my determination was, okay, I have all summer before it starts to get cold again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the summer, build momentum, ride every day, and see how far into winter I can do it. And I found that next winter when I started biking to work, I was so much happier. There's so much sunshine to be had in Manitoba winters if you're just outside and if you're moving. And that air, while cold, is also just so refreshing. It might be a little bit cold at first if you're layering properly, but like after a couple minutes, like your body just warms up. And there's also something really special about being out there when it's -30 and sunny, and just being in it.
It is very special indeed. And one of the things that sort of reminds me of is talking about, when you were a kid, 10, 11, and just finding that freedom, jumping on the bike. It sounds like you've continued to find that freedom now as an adult, as a symphony player. And you can find it through cycling, and I think also through music in a way. If you're just tuning in, my name is Simon Rusnak. You're listening to Morning Light, and I'm chatting with WSO Assistant Principal Bassist Daniel Perry. And we're chatting about, being up in Alaska, grizzly bears thankfully sleeping, and you got to ride for some 350 miles. The Invitational, which is just absolutely wild. I know you've done plenty of this stuff, and you've also already alluded to this, but you cycle to symphony gigs, and I'm not just talking about the concert hall. I think there was one in Brandon. Did you cycle to that? Am I right? Am I remembering this correctly?
I haven't done Brandon yet. I've done our holiday tours in Portage La Prairie and in Steinbach. And also I've ridden out to Kenora when we've done our summer concerts out there. And actually, one year I even wrangled a few of my coworkers to do it with me.
Great ride that is.
Yeah,
like whatever, like 200 something K-ish?
Yeah, 220K.
Yeah.
We stopped in West Hawk where they've got showers at the campground.
Wonderful.
And everybody was really happy about that.
So let's talk more about that. So you cycle 220 kilometers to Kenora, and I mean, that's a feat in and of itself. You get there, and then you have to play a gig. Like, can we talk about the stamina that's involved in that?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot. There's a lot of crossover with the kind of endurance riding that I like to do, and kind of the focus that comes with playing at a professional level. I think any musician who has a job, who's gone through the audition process, can attest to it. That at the end of the day, like, so much is about pacing yourself. Can you make it through the end of Tchaikovsky's Fifth Symphony without having your bow arm fall off? And can you make it to the fourth round of an audition and still be mentally honed in on creating the musical product that you want to display?
Can you talk more about the parallels between cycling and not only just cycling? I mean, so often we think of it as an individual activity, but as you talked about right off the get-go, I mean, one of the great things about cycling is the community, the network that develops. There's a lot of parallels there with the music community too, right?
Oh, absolutely. I would say the first one, as I mentioned earlier, with cycling, it's so easy to collaborate and interact with the people around you in your community. That sense of community connection is there, and it's also something that's pumping feel-good chemicals through your body, right? So like, you're moving, and you get to share that excitement with other people who are doing the same thing. Like, just on my way down here through the morning rush through downtown was just great, because there's all these people whose faces I recognize at this point, and other ones that are brand new because this cycling scene is growing so fast. But I think there's a lot of parallels with music. Finding out that somebody else is a musician. I meet a lot of other bass players that are in different music scenes in Winnipeg, and you can kind of tell, like, right off the bat, it's like, okay, like, we're kind of on the same wavelength. Like here's where I try to do like a low grunt, like a bass player, like, huh. But yeah, and playing music with other people, once again, like, is doing really good things for our nervous system. It's pumping feel-good chemicals into our body, right? It's a collaboration. You're doing your own part, but other people are doing their part as well, and you're feeling that. I think with the events that I like to do, like the Winter Ultras is a good example, like Iditarod. I recently made a comparison between doing something like that and working on a major symphonic work. Something like Mahler's Fifth Symphony, or another big piece that maybe we spend years and years working on in school, learning the context of that composer, and then also learning all the excerpts that we might face in an audition, and then to actually get to play some of these big works in context, especially ones that only come up once in a blue moon, but we spend so much time fixating on. And the treat to actually be in that moment, that's a lot what these cycling events feel like for me too. Iditarod is historical, right? You've got over 100 years of history. Yeah. I mean, 10,000 if you look at the history of dog sledding and the indigenous roots that the Iditarod Trail has put on. So same thing as classical music, where you've got long-standing history, and then you get to come in at your point in time, and there's other people there too, and you're all collaborating in sharing and creating this special moment together.
Before I let you go, I'm sure there's one thing that people have just sort of been ruminating on throughout this entire conversation. They're just like, Simon, just ask the question already. What do you do with your bass when you're biking? What do you do with it?
Okay, so I am very fortunate that the Winnipeg Symphony, in our current residence at Centennial Concert Hall, we have an instrument storage room. We have a bass room inside that storage room. And before I moved here, I invested in a second bass. So I have my nice bass that I usually play for Masterworks concerts and anytime we're at the hall. So my nice old French bass. And for anything such as run-out concerts or typically what I do is I leave it at home, is I have a second bass that's like a mass-produced Chinese-made bass. And it works really well for me. If I really need to move my basses around, swap instruments for getting my Chinese bass like on the truck for one of our run-out concerts, what I'll do is I'll get my car co-op membership and get one of the cars that's near my house.
Good idea, because I was going to say cycling with a bass strapped to your back, probably not a great idea for the instrument or for you, just thinking about it. So, yeah, I've just been wondering all these years, thinking, like, what does he do with the bass? That makes so much sense. Also, one last thing here, Daniel. We opened this conversation with a little bit of Mendelssohn 4. That was a suggestion of yours. It comes from a cycling movie from your hometown. Can you talk more about that?
Oh, absolutely. So Mendelssohn's Fourth Symphony is featured in the film Breaking Away. This is a movie from the late 70s. There's a couple notable actors in it. One would be a really young, shredded Dennis Quaid.
No way.
And then another one is, I'm blanking on his name, but he's the tall, curly-haired wet bandit from Home Alone. And so those guys are two of the really close buddies of the main character in this film, who's based on a true story. His wife ended up being the head lunch lady at my elementary school.
No way.
But Breaking Away is the story of a local in Bloomington, Indiana, where Indiana University is, with the big music school. So the locals, they're called cutters because they're the ones that cut all the stones out of the quarries that built all the university buildings. That's also where the Empire State Building came from. And all the university students have an annual bike race at IU called the Little 500, of course, named after the Indy 500. And it's laps of a kind of dirt gravel track with single speed bikes that have coaster brakes, and they have to be very specific bikes that you cannot do too many modifications to. So there's something really unique about this race. But all the sororities and fraternities, they'll establish teams, and like if you ever go to the gym, you'll see them just training year round just to do this one bike race. But back in the 70s, I want to say it was the 70s that the actual events took place, as well as the film. But a team of locals was allowed to enter the race, and they won.
No way.
And so this movie is the story about this one very passionate local and his obsession with being Italian and faking being Italian in order to woo one of the university students.
Very fun. I'm going to have to add that to my watch list. I can't say I've seen it. I'm going to have to dig it up. We've got one last pick of yours to end this conversation off. A selection from the greatest cycling movie of all time. Do you mind teasing this one for us? Okay, so one of the greatest cycling movies of all time is E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I think there's a number of reasons why. One, it's by Steven Spielberg. Two, John Williams, one of the greatest movie composers of all time. And that scene where they're running and they take flight with E.T. sitting in that front basket is just so iconic. I also just love
once again, that feeling of camaraderie and just like kids riding around on their BMXs that comes with that movie.
So special indeed. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me here on Winnipeg's Classic 107. Happy Bike Week and happy cycling.
Happy Bike Week. Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Great having you here.